Hey everybody, welcome to the second edition of the No Small Thing Enneagram podcast via YouTube. We are the podcast dedicated to helping you live a less certain, more curious life. And I am Scott. And just so you know, if you like anything that you're hearing here, we have been actually recording a podcast for the last 5 or 6 years. And there's over 200 episodes available on any platform that you can get your podcast from. So if anything is vibing with you here and you actually want to hear a dynamic conversation between me and my podcast co-host Mace, go check us out on Spotify or Apple Music or wherever you get your podcasts. But this is supposed to sort of fulfill an additional need for me to keep talking. There's so many things that I want to talk about, and no small thing, we sort of think that anything is worth talking about or getting curious about, and we can use any topic to sort of model what it looks like to get curious. And right now, I happen to be very curious about Kendrick Lamar. So last week, I recorded an episode, the first episode, the inaugural YouTube episode of me just talking about whatever interests me, about Kendrick Lamar and sort of my journey with Kendrick Lamar. And this week, I'm still interested in Kendrick Lamar. I might continue to be interested in Kendrick Lamar for a few weeks. I'm going to try to record these on Thursdays. And aside from that, I don't know if I have much more capacity to be recording. I work and I'm in school right now, in grad school, to be a therapist. But anyways, this week I'm very interested in music reviews. So just sit with me there for a second and get that idea and that topic in your head. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Music reviews. And the reason is Pitchfork released their review of Kendrick Lamar's most recent album, GNX, and gave it a 6.6. And I'm recording this on my iPhone 12 mini. That's all I have. I don't have a fancy camera or anything like that, although all things considered, this is a relatively fancy camera. And so I'm not like sharing my screen or anything like that with any of you. I wouldn't mind. It's not like I'm trying to hide anything. I can't do it on my iPhone, I don't think. So I have an old school printed out version, like I'm some sort of old-timey news reporter. And I'm going to be reading some of this article or this review with you all today and just stopping every once in a while to share my thoughts. And I want to use it as a way, obviously, for me to just process my opinions and thoughts about this review, but also, if possible, to get you thinking about your own opinions about this review and this article, and also revisiting some of your opinions and experiences about the album if you're still processing and listening to the album. I think we'll all be doing that for a while. But just to reiterate, I love Kendrick Lamar. Talked about it last week in my video. And I love this new album. And in so many ways, I think a lot of fans are thinking, maybe this isn't where we have always wanted Kendrick to go. Maybe we would never have become the types of fans that we are of Kendrick if this was the type of music that he was always making. Because I think in so many ways, via Good Kid, Mad City, despite what he might have been doing before that album, there is this sort of depth and ability to tell stories and hold nuance and complexity and draw people out in a very fascinating, artistic, poetic, profound literary way in his albums that fans have found highly appealing and refreshing, especially compared to a lot of modern music, especially in realm of like mumble rap or something like that. And I enjoy folks like the Migos or Playboi Carti or something like that. That has its time and place. But in general, I think it's been refreshing to have somebody really with the depth of Kendrick's music. And it also would be fun if he gave us bops and bangers and hits like he has on GNX. So fans, I think, are like, we knew that he was always capable of this and we're really enjoying this moment. And I can't imagine, I don't think or believe that he intends to only ever make music like this. I believe that if he keeps making music, and there is speculation that there's a second album on the way, and this is not even the album, this was like a mixtape or something like that to pave the way for the album. I think this is also just a very fun, very welcome for fans anyways, next stage in Kendrick's evolution in terms of an artist. So this review, and I'm going to get to in a second, this Pitchfork review, this guy, his name is Alphonse Pierre, and apparently he is the head writer or editor at Pitchfork, gave this a 6.6. And I don't know what you all's relationship is with Pitchfork, but I'm going to talk about it for a second. I'm going to talk about Pitchfork, and I'm going to talk about my relationship with reviews, and I'm going to talk about my opinions on reviews. And then I'm going to get into this review, this actual review. And man, I in some ways I do love that I can just talk freely without any interruptions. But I also, if anybody's vibing with this, I wish we could all just have a big, long conversation with anybody that was interested about these topics. But reviews. I'm 45 years old. I've been a music fan my whole life for as long as I can remember. Probably my initial, interest in music started with Beat It and Michael Jackson, like a lot of people from the 80s and stuff. When I started really getting into music, and I mean like collecting CDs, and going to music stores on Music Tuesdays and getting little collections going and playlists and becoming like a fan of the lore and the stories and in a way like learning how to listen to music, whatever that means, I really started getting into reviews. And there was a music store here in Seattle called Easy Street, and it was sort of a local, hip, cool music store. And there was also Tower Records, which I would go to both. But there was all sorts of magazines that you could get. And you could make the argument that maybe I was spending too much money on magazines. And I probably was. And I don't get magazines anymore. Do I? No magazines. I don't think. But I didn't even have any subscriptions, which again isn't saving very much money. But I loved going to the store and buying magazines, music magazines. I would get The Source, Double XL. I would get Entertainment Weekly. I always got Spin Magazine. And I liked getting to know the perspective of the different reviewers. And not just with music, but with like movies. Like I did have a subscription to Entertainment Weekly. And I became very endeared, almost like they were my friends, to Owen Gleiberman and Lisa Schwartzbaum. They were the reviewers for the movie section of Entertainment Weekly. And when a movie came out, I got very excited, not because I needed to be told what to think of a movie. I just liked getting their perspective. And I wasn't into YouTube back then like that. I don't even think YouTube did things like this very regularly. And I would just get my issue of Entertainment Weekly, and even if I hadn't seen the movie, I really wanted to see what Owen Gleiberman or Lisa Schwartzbaum had to say about the movie. And I started to develop relationships with other reviewers in those other types of hip-hop magazines or Spin Magazine or Rolling Stone, things like that. And I also started really enjoying comparing different reviews. So let me just try to say something about reviews in general. And I'm just freeform talking here. I have no notes. But if you're putting me on the spot, which you're not, I'm putting myself on the spot, and asking me about reviews, I don't think reviews are that useful. People can use a review for whatever they want, to have somebody tell you what to think. And in addition, I don't see critics or review writers as actual even critics. I think critic is almost an unhelpful word sometimes because it can be a little bit misleading. I think a processor or a translator or something like that, and not to put the critic or the writer of music in a position of authority, but to appreciate that somebody has put themselves in a position where they are spending their time, their efforts, immersing themselves in these pieces for our behalf. I mean, this is thinking about reviewers in the best faith possible, and then working very hard to help us process these works of art that we enjoy so much. And I've heard certain writers over the years talk about art criticism and stuff like that, and say, in some ways, not entirely, of course, the critic is almost more important than the artist. And I don't believe that, but I think there is a point to be made that the critic is just as important, or at least very important, in terms of the way that society processes art. So I resonate with that. I also have to imagine, and I think there's all sorts of anecdotal proof that shows that artists, rappers, pop musicians, but painters and drama actors and stuff like that appreciate critics that have a take on the thing that they've created. So if an artist has to get into some sort of like metaphysical play space where they are just taking all the training wheels off of their brain and creative process, and they're just throwing something together that feels right to them, and they're not worried too much about what people are going to think, and they're trying to create something original, and then they just put it out there. A critic can come along, or a translator or a writer, and say, here's what I think this means. And I think some artists have enjoyed or appreciated getting that feedback or being in dialogue with the reviewer. And based on a lot of the people I watch on YouTube, like Anthony Fantano or Sean C, and people like that, oftentimes it seems as if artists will reach out and say they appreciated what people had to say about them. Another person I've been watching who's almost, I would say at this point, one of my main inspirations for even doing this is Professor Sky, who has a style that I really appreciate, which is just this free form talking thing where it's like unedited. He's usually in his bathrobe drinking coffee in the morning. I just find that so appealing because it's just like you're on his back porch with him talking about music, which is exactly what I would want, which is why I watch his channel. So I'm thinking about, he recently did a review of Ab Soul, who's one of Kendrick's friends from Black Hippie, and he said Ab Soul reached out to him and said how much he appreciated his review. So some artists get a little punchy of like, oh, you didn't risk anything by creating. I risked and I created, and all you're going to do is shit all over my art. And I think if there are critics or reviewers that are doing something in bad faith, that can be true. But generally, very generally, I do think critics are in good faith are doing their part to process in society, in dialogue with the artist and their particular artists' audiences, what they think about a specific work. So as somebody that, would get really fired up about an album that was coming out, like I remember when Jay-Z's The Blueprint came out, or any of the Kanye albums, many albums, you guys. When an album would come out, I would process it, and sometimes it would hit me in all sorts of mysterious ways, good, bad, and everything in between. And to be able to read someone's opinion on it really helped me not change my opinion, although it seems like it wouldn't be wise to read an article or a review and not let it impact you a little bit, to be in dialogue. There have been times over the years where I have loved an album, absolutely loved an album, and thought this is like a 10 out of 10 album, A+, and almost all across the board, critics have not liked it. And I say, I don't know what to do. I still love this album. So maybe I'm not like super intellectual or smart or impressive to go around liking this album when all the critics have hated it, but I do like it. And then there's times where there are critics that all across the board love an album or a movie for that matter. And I'm like, I don't get it. I don't like it. I've tried. And if anything, if there's sort of a consensus about a certain type of album or movie or work or anything, piece of art, and it's being like across the board agreed upon that it's amazing, I will try. I'll say, maybe I need to challenge myself. Maybe I need to challenge myself to like this a little bit. So that is the history I sort of bring into my relationship with reviews. And Pitchfork, now we arrive at Pitchfork. Pitchfork at some point in my life, and I don't know, I would say probably about 10 years ago. I don't know how these things happen. You start to just pick up a vibe online where there was a reputation of sorts that Pitchfork was the snobbiest or the most intellectual review source, more than Rolling Stone, more than Spin Magazine. It was sort of this, and people had a very mixed emotions about that. People would be like, oh, you read Pitchfork? Oh my gosh. Like, so you're like a music snob, or like, you're sort of brainless because you just get all your information from Pitchfork. Or a lot of people don't even know what Pitchfork is. But I think it did become a place where I was like, almost secretly, because it brought up so many things for people, but I was like, I'm getting a lot of my music information from Pitchfork. And I am probably for the last 10 years checking at least once a week to see what the news is, what they're wanting to highlight, new artists they're wanting to tell me about, and definitely, most definitely, their reviews. And I think, again, for the last 10 years and to this day, currently, I love Pitchfork end of the year lists. I love Pitchfork articles if they're going to deep dive an artist, and I love their reviews. And my brain, in a way, is trained to think about music through what will Pitchfork give this review, or what will they rate this. And I'll say in fairness too, like I also do think, just because it's fun, to think about what Anthony Fantano might give an album. Not that I would say that's the end all be all, because I very easily, casually, freely disagree with Anthony Fantano. Although I'm not mad about my disagreements, but like, you know, Anthony Fantano gave Chance the Rapper The Big Day a 0. I think he did that relatively playfully, although I think he hated the album. I definitely don't think that album deserves a 0. I think it's like a good, in the Anthony Fantano realm of rating, it's probably worth a 4. But he gave it a 0, which is fascinating. Okay. Also, when it comes to hip hop, Pitchfork has also helped me get in touch with a lot of artists over the years that I would not have known about. I would say recently JPEG Mafia is an artist I found probably via Pitchfork and a few other places. And most significantly, I would say I became a fan of Run the Jewels because of Pitchfork. So I would say thank you to Pitchfork, because Run the Jewels, absolutely one of my favorite rap albums of all time, or groups. And I remember the year they gave Run the Jewels 2 Album of the Year. And they might have given Run the Jewels 1, at least in the top 10 or something like that. So I just kept seeing that sign like this, you know, and an album that had this on the cover. And I was like, well, they really like this group for some reason. I should check it out. And of course, once I did, it was game over, because I love Run the Jewels. So here we are. I would say over the years, they have highly rated Kendrick's music. I don't have it off the top of my head, but Good Kid, Mad City, To Pimp a Butterfly, and Damn were all in the best new music category with ratings well over an 8. Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers was the first album that they did not give a best new music label, and it was his lowest rated album so far at like 7.2 or something like that. Now, when GNX came out, I'm in my brain thinking, okay, what do I know about Pitchfork? What do I know about the lenses they view this stuff? What do I know about what they think about Kendrick? What do I know about what they know about the broader culture of hip hop? What do I know about them hosting Kendrick at their festivals? All things considered, knowing that they also don't really love Drake these days, I'm thinking this is going to be his highest rated album. And now I feel so naive. I was like, it's going to be a 9.2 or something like that, because this is just hitting that sweet spot of what I perceive to be actually fairly deep at the end of the day, especially compared to other rap, but also hitting that sweet spot in the zeitgeist, almost like Brat did. And they loved Brat, and everybody loved Brat. So I was like, this is the next. Brat is handing Brat off to Kendrick. It's like we had Brat Summer, and then that, of course, with all the remixes and stuff, trickled into a Brat Fall, and now we're getting into Kendrick season. And I just would think that Pitchfork would appreciate that. A 6.6 to me, in this day and age, for Kendrick is, to me, a bad review. And it is a bad review. So let's get into that. Again, wish you were here so we could churn other ideas and thoughts up with this. But I mean, that I think you get a general idea about what I think about reviews and a general idea of what I think about Pitchfork. Again, don't think they're the end all be all. I don't get all my information. I have my own opinions. But do any of us have our own opinions? Who knows? They're all coming from the outside. And I'm sticking by my guns with GNX. But I'm going to read this. I'm going to read this review to you guys, and I'll stop. So before I start, let me just say something. Alphonse Pierre is doing something very interesting at Pitchfork. Apparently he's a head writer, if not the head writer, and he writes a lot about hip hop. And I'll also say this, based on what I know about Pitchfork, and this could be a sign of bad things to come, they recently were purchased by GQ, I think. So some of the criticism they're getting is like they sound like some sort of random basic music review page in the back of GQ. Now, I don't actually think that's true, because this Alphonse Pierre, and I don't want to be too critical of him. I just want to say, Alphonse Pierre, you're not watching this, but if you ever heard of this, or if somebody you know watches this, I'm not shitting on you. I just disagree with your review. So that's fair. I'm sure that's fair. And I will say I generally disagree with what he's doing with hip hop at Pitchfork. Okay, so I said I was just about to get into this article, but let me just give a little bit more scaffolding to what I'm about to say. What I mean by that is I I um I think it is on I think it's the responsibility of a magazine like Pitchfork, from my perspective, if you're going to remain relevant, if you're going to remain in the center of certain types of conversations, to take into consideration a type of responsibility that you have to be relatively faithful to the general. There is no objective reality here. There is no objective reality, but there is something like reality. So I would say with something like GNX, the appropriate review is somewhere between a 7 and a 9. And there's lots of room because they could give it like a 7.2, an 8.3, anything between there. I'd be like, okay, I can see your point. It's not the best new album. You didn't give it a 9. You don't think it's the best album of the year. But you generally have to admit, if you're a magazine on the level of Pitchfork, that it's a big, important, well-executed album. And if you're not going to do that, you're almost intentionally stepping out of the conversation. Because if you go to Metacritic or something like this is almost a universally praised album. And a lot of people have something good to say about it. And I'm going to end with a little snippet from what Paste had to say about this album. All that to say, Alphonse Pierre, he came out with, and you can go look this up on Pitchfork, he came out with a 25 best hip-hop albums of 2024. And to me, that is sort of a harbinger or a canary in the coal mine or something like that. Because if you go back and look at that list, there is no mainstream hip-hop album in that list. So there is no Chromacopia, there is no Glorilla, there is no Schoolboy Q, there is no Corday. Not that that should be on a top 25, but there is no Mavi. Whoever came out with a big out, there's no JPEG Mafia. So Pitchfork, one of their top editors, if not the top editor, released the top 25 rap albums of 2024, and none of the major rap albums were on that list. So to me, it's saying, in a way, you're relegating yourself to like a fringy Substack writer or WordPress writer or fringy YouTuber, which I am. I'm a fringy YouTuber. It's like somebody creating a little Tumblr page or something like that with their favorite albums of the year, which is completely valid. It's completely valid. And if somebody would have sent me their favorite rap albums of the year and there are all these like really niche underground artsy groups, I'd be like, that's really cool. And I'll probably try to check some of those out. But I don't think it's a good look for a major publication like Pitchfork, because I don't know. I'd be really interested to hear what you all say about this, whoever's watching. But don't you think there is a type of responsibility that a publication like Pitchfork has, or anything like any publication like them, to sort of be honest? I don't know. It seems like disingenuous. It seems sort of disingenuous to say these are the top 25 rap albums of the year. It would be saying something like, I have a very specific taste. I have a niche taste. I'm sort of tired of mainstream hip hop, so this is my list. But that's not what Pitchfork does. I mean, if you look at their end of the year list, they have the top 50 albums of the year. That is a pretty good list. It doesn't feel niche. It feels like a committee put it together, you know. And their best album by Cindy Lee is universally praised by almost every critic I heard. This Cindy Lee released an exclusive album on YouTube. You can't even get it on physical vinyl or anything like that yet. And it was like 2.5 hours long of some of the coolest, most interesting, eclectic, strange. It sounds very Lynchian. I can get into that later, but I've loved it. I loved it. And so when they say Cindy Lee and then Brat is number 2, that all makes sense to me. And if they didn't like Brat, that'd be fine. But I mean, it should make a top 50 list, right? For this year. Okay. So another little harbinger, if that's the right word, for this is that this guy, Alphonse Pierre, wrote a scathing review of when Kendrick dropped his Euphoria diss track. Didn't like the sonics, didn't like the lyrics, thought it was kind of dumb, terrible beats. I mean, go look it up if you want to read it. I'm not going to read it to you right now because I'm going to read this eventually. Just outright did not like, and just, again, said things about that diss track that were just untrue, like says uneloquent, uncreative. And from my perspective, it probably is one of the most eloquent, one of the most creative, one of the most avant-garde diss tracks I've ever heard. It's got everything. I love the beat switches. Go look at YouTube reactions, read reviews. Most people love the beat switches. Most people think he's functioning on all the high levels. One of my favorite reviewers, Screwface Jean, always says he loves his rappers to be righteous and ratchet. So I think Kendrick has a lot of eloquent, insightful, poetic things to say in that diss track. And then he just says stuff like, I hate the way that you walk, the way that you dress. So just like in that realm of ratchet, whatever that word means, but just sort of dumbed down, fun, basic, guttural, just from the gut, saying I basically just hate you. And I like that. So you don't have to like these things. I understand if somebody just I just don't like it, but to go out of your way to sort of on a major publication intellectually say things that just really aren't true. Most people would say that just isn't true. It's a very eloquent, well-written diss track with lots of fun beat switches, very entertaining. So that was a sign that's like, okay, this guy isn't into Kendrick, which is okay. It's fine for him to have this opinion. Anyways, let's get into this. I feel like I'm a news reporter, but anyways, 6.6. Let's just read what he has to say. Kendrick's glossy, hyper-local sixth album arrives after a year of unimpeachable victories. Okay, unimpeachable victories. The question is, how much do you enjoy watching him take lap after lap? Well, if he's asking that question, most people have really enjoyed watching him take the laps. So here comes the review, everyone. Hope you enjoy hearing me read this, but I'll stop and pause for comment every once in a while. Kendrick Lamar can freeze time by surprise dropping an album because he's one of the most popular rappers of the century, which is nothing short of a miracle. There aren't too many albums out there as theatrical as the coming-of-age breakout album Good Kid, Mad City, or the jazz-infused, organized chaos of To Pimp a Butterfly. And shit, if there are, they definitely aren't platinum-selling pop culture behemoths. Those early projects shaped his mythos, formed his supposed genius. Okay, so we're already in a little bit of a strange zone here. Formed his supposed genius, and now genius is in quotes. Why? I think in terms of music, in terms of pop culture, in terms of like legends like John Coltrane to Miles Davis to any sort of musician, whoever you want to put in the genius category, from my perspective, and I think probably a lot of yours, Kendrick has to be in the conversation. So I don't know why genius is in quotes. And in an era of increasing ephemerality and enough heft to become indispensable. So yeah, in some ways you could call Kendrick indispensable, whatever that means. Fascinatingly, 2022's Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers attempted to strip away all the institutional recognition of the first and only rapper to win a Pulitzer. That project is far from my favorite Kendrick, so he made that clear. So I guess he also wrote that Mr. Morale review, which was, now I haven't looked. You guys can go back and look. I have to imagine that he didn't write the other Kendrick reviews. So now we're already sort of thinking like, where is the continuity or the through line in terms of how Pitchfork gives their ratings? That's an interesting question, right? But the music is so raw and uncomfortable, so provocative. He's talking about Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers here. And sincere, so full of contradictions and hypocrisies. In a moment where our biggest rap stars and legends, Drake, Jay, Kanye, Snoop, whoever, have basically become institutions of their own in which music is just one department of the enterprise, Mr. Morale's naked humanity was genuinely risky and exciting. Okay, I agree. Less interesting, but an all-time spectacle, was his hating-ass feud with Drake. Okay, so everybody. Less interesting? You could say not as palatable, problematic, you didn't like it, whatever word you want. It's not less interesting, right? It's obviously, if anything, more interesting. People have been interested in it. It has gotten more traction. Like there were some reviewers that I watched online where they were, when Kendrick dropped that song with Baby Keem before he came out with Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, he had that line where he said, "Smoking on your top 5." And some reviewers were like, he is not smoking on anyone's top 5. This album is boring. They didn't like Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. So for him to just be talking about Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, and he says, that's interesting. Less interesting, however, but an all-time spectacle, I'm gonna get a little sassy here, was his hating ass feud with Drake. So disagree. It was obviously very interesting. It's where the contradictions and hypocrisies that previously made him so real suddenly felt unusually self-interested and corporatized. And again, I think that's what, I don't know about corporatized, but I do think that's one of the things that many Kendrick fans have found refreshing this go around, is that it does feel self-interested. It's like after all this time of posturing about like being a sort of selfless savior, he is now just being like, I'm a regular person who has needs and also thinks he's the best rapper alive. Like, again, I've watched many reviewers who say, thank you, finally. We can listen to this and it all syncs up. You know you're the best. We know you're the best. Stop pretending. Stop being fake humble or something like that. And just indulge and acknowledge that you're one of the best rappers of all, if not the best currently. So self-interested. I don't know about corporate. You let me know in the comments. Does this album feel more corporate? He whooped Drake by labeling the Toronto Kingpin an FAN and a PDF and a hip-hop interloper, using regional rap scenes to build his authenticity, all on arguably the biggest rap song of the decade so far. Yep, true. It was hard as hell. True. A clubby rendition of his hometown player sound dripping with radioactive bile. True. And very interesting, right? From the jump, it was transparent that Kendrick, who had Kodak Black up and down Mr. Morale, I don't know about that. Also, I do agree that it was problematic to have Kodak Black on Mr. Morale. But here we are. Up and down Mr. Morale, and has always been a close collaborator of Dr. Dre, wasn't actually concerned about claiming the moral high ground. It was all dirt to shovel on Drake's grave before Kendrick rode away with the title of greatest rapper of this era. Fine, I guess. Rap beef can be messed up. Okay. I appreciate this person's perspective. And I want to say, whether you like it or not, or whether you agree with it or not, because I would say I generally tend to mostly disagree. I think the perspective Kendrick is often taking with a lot of his music via his faith, via all the messages from Good Kid, Mad City, is that people are redeemable. Now, whether you believe that or not, I think probably from a Christian spirituality, you're going to heaven someday, or you can be, forgiven or redeemed by a higher power. Yes. I don't know how necessarily that translates in real life. If people like Kodak Black should be rehabilitated or let back on rap albums or something like that. That's not something that I feel equipped to address. But I don't think it's hypocritical for Kendrick to have concerns about Drake and then associate himself with people like Kodak Black or Dr. Dre. Let me know if you disagree. I can definitely see that looked at through a certain lens, it could be a little hypocritical. And I'm also seeing that I think people like Tyler and Kendrick are saying, I am a hypocrite. There's duality in me. There's love and hate, the yin and yang elements of my music and personality, which I find to be interesting. Then as time passed, we're back to the article. Then as time passed and the meaning of Not Like Us, which could always be fairly interpreted as a celebration of Black LA culture, became commodified from Kamala Harris to the NBA, Kendrick's angle shifted. Did it? Subtly leaning into the savior complex, the myth-making, the branding he resisted on Mr. Morale. Right. So I think on Mr. Morale, there is a certain type, whether or not it actually happened, none of us will know because we're not part of Kendrick's private life and in his therapy sessions. Symbolically, through his art, there was an element of Kendrick's savior complex that died or got reinterpreted or something like that. But to say that Kendrick can now and forever not delve into his superhero tendencies via whatever role he thinks he needs or wants to play in Compton and the world doesn't seem fair either. Like I think if it's, especially if it's art and whatever he did at the Pop Out tour where he united all the gangs, you say, oh, I thought on Mr. Morale you said you're not a savior. Well, maybe there's a death of a certain type of mania regarding your role as a savior, and you can sort of let that go. And once you let that go, you can ease back into a type of savior, whatever that means, in a way that feels good, healthy, grounded for you. Now, as time plays out, maybe sadly, Kendrick will go the way of Kanye and become some sort of megalomaniac who can't stop just being a narcissist. But I don't think that's what Kendrick will do. But anyways, so he says the branding he resisted Mr. Morale. In September, he released a buzzkill single called Watch the Party Die. Okay. In a way, it was a buzzkill, but it was also very interesting, this guy. And I thought it was, at least in terms of what we know about Kendrick, to be sort of electrifying in the sense of like, what is he going to do next? It held my attention for sure, and I think it held a lot of people's attention. So he released this buzzkill single called Watch the Party Die, where his mission moved past Drake and toward burning the rotten core of the hip-hop industry to the ground. He portrayed himself like Clint Eastwood's delusioned fugitive in the outlaw Josie Wales, riding through the West on horseback looking for revenge on the corrupt. Sounds fun and interesting to me. I mean, you know, a lot of people have said hip-hop is a sport, and like it's like we have this amazing matchup between two huge teams, like Michael Jordan and Larry Bird or something like that. And for the competition, they're going to be playing at their top level. And that's what we want. I mean, I think that's generally what most music and hip hop fans have wanted through this. That's why I'm like, who is this person speaking for? And he can just speak for himself, but I'm sharing my opinion on it. Last month, in an artist-on-artist interview, Kendrick explained to SZA the real meaning of Not Like Us. Not like us is the energy of who I am, the type of man I represent. This man has morals. He has values. He believes in something. He stands on something. He's not pandering. Did we hear the same song? This was never a battle of righteousness. Next February, he will perform the Super Bowl halftime show. Okay, this was never a battle of righteousness? When you hear Kendrick and people that believe that they've experienced a certain type of spirit in Kendrick, there is, I guess and suppose, Kendrick's version of righteousness. And there is a traditional hip-hop enthusiast version of righteousness. There is a type of purity that comes from people that have experienced a certain type of life that are using hip-hop to get that message out via their art, via their connections. And it's valid to critique a version of hip-hop that has gotten shallow or too pop. Obviously, I think people have made a great point that like Drake's bottom line has not really been hurt through all this, but to say this was never a battle of righteousness, like this guy actually wrote that sentence. I'm gonna say Kendrick is a person. Kendrick has all sorts of competing drives and desires and motivations, but I really do believe in good faith that for Kendrick, at least, and for a lot of his friends and for his community, that this was a battle of righteousness. Next February, he'll perform the Super Bowl halftime show, an appearance announced in an ad where he stands casually dressed in front of a massive American flag. Now, I don't have an interpretation of the ad for the Super Bowl. I don't love America and capitalism and all that America stands for. I don't know if Kendrick was being ironic or satirical or reintroducing a type of pride in America via what he stands for. I think one of my favorite symbols was when he did his performance of All Right at the end of the Grammys, and this huge outline of the continent of Africa appeared on the screen with Compton in the middle. So with this type of imagery, it's a repurposing of some type of imagery that might have been problematic or harmful in ways. I have no idea. But it might be a valid critique to say, we didn't love you doing this ad in front of the American flag. With echoes of Cowboy Carter cover, the image is that of a loose cannon hip-hop vigilante. Yes, I like that. The one who years ago told Complex he's so hip-hop that when he was born, his dad drove him home from the hospital in a Buick GNX bumping Big Daddy Kane, taking control of the biggest, most classically American stage. It's the kind of heavy-handed, brand-conscious narrative you'd expect from Beyonce and Taylor Swift, pop star machines. Okay. What do we think of that? For a Kendrick fan, I watched a video on YouTube yesterday where people are thinking that this initial GNX album isn't the album, that it's a mixtape meant to pave the way for the album Kendrick's been working on for a long time. This other album, this review said this YouTube I watched last night seemed very compellingly to be making the case that Kendrick for a while and his team have been plotting to release his version of Thriller. So his big media takeover, smash all the records, be the main guy, pop star, just like Michael Jackson. So probably even above Beyonce and Taylor Swift if he could pull it off. So I think that is valid. I mean, you always want to know later what happens after. Like what happens after Kendrick becomes the biggest pop star in the world, if that happens. I don't know. He could use that well. He could use it poorly. I'm sure we could think of all sorts of huge famous people who have generally in the end aged well in terms of how they've used their stardom. I'm thinking of somebody like Bob Dylan or Stevie Wonder. I'm sure or Bruce Springsteen. I'm sure there are problematic. Nobody's perfect, but generally I think people like that have used their stardom and their pop superstar notoriety for good purposes and they've aged well. You can disagree with me. I there could be holes in that. I don't know, but then he says all this content undercuts GNX. No, I disagree. Kendrick Lamar's sixth album, now it's about Kendrick. I want to place my skill sets as a black exec, he says, straight up on The Heart Part 6, which behind a smoothly diced up SWV sample, steals back the long-running series Drake tried to jack. Not hard. Drake should get his version scrubbed for the internet. I agree with that. This no longer is just about Kendrick the rapper, but Kendrick the businessman. Okay? After Mr. Morale, he left TDE to go all in on PG Lang, the multilingual at-service company he launched in 2020 with his longtime right-hand man, Dave Free. Running a company doesn't inherently hollow out his lyrics, but it does give all of GNX's motivational phrases. I deserve it all. We got the same 24. What you mad for? Few solid N-words left, but it's not enough. The coldness of quotes from a speech he's giving at a Black Men in Tech conference. He was always extremely famous, but suddenly he has the mega celebrity sheen. I don't see it this way. And I would love to see some other sort of hip hop head types comment on this. Like, interpret this review for me. Review this review for me. Help me understand what this person is talking about. Like, if there is a message that we generally like and a personality that we generally like and a musician that we generally like, why won't we want to see that person get bigger? I know that there are sellouts out there. I mean, maybe Kanye sold out in some ways and also is struggling with his mental health, but I wouldn't want like Mos Def and Talib Kweli and Black Star to always remain stuck in constant anonymity for the rest of their lives. And I know in hip hop circles, Black Star is not stuck in anonymity, but I wouldn't mind if Black Star was bigger. What? I wouldn't mind if someday Black Star, I don't know why Black Star is coming to mind, but I wouldn't mind if the Roots got bigger. I wouldn't mind if Tribe Called Quest was bigger. I don't mind this stuff. I don't think regular everyday hip hop fans mind this stuff. They think it's part of it. Thankfully, that doesn't completely kill the vibe of GNX, a victory lap on a Mobius strip. Interesting reference. Blending the man on a mission intensity that powered him through his duel with Drake, with homage to the West Coast that follows in the footsteps of Not Like Us, bringing a whole roster of LA roughhousers along for the ride. Kendrick's rapping, competitive and acrobatic splits the difference between funny and vengeful. N-word feel entitled cause he knew me since I was a kid. Bitch, I cut my granny off if she don't see it like I see it. We remember that line. Fiercely on the hyphy house party, TV off, probably the most ridiculous line about a granny since Rio de Young OG tried to buy cough syrup off his boy's grandmother. In his first verse of Hey Now, his venom takes on the hushed flow of the Draco the Ruler chattering over nature sounds. The stripped down bounce of the mustard-led beat is irresistible, even if it sounds like Ron the producer with the training wheels off. The guests are memorable too. We have about a page and a half left. The guests are memorable too, though Kendrick doesn't cede enough ground to them. What? Oh, Kendrick doesn't cede enough ground to the guests? I totally disagree with that. I mean, it's cool that he has them on there, and as I've listened to the album, I really, really appreciate the features, but I don't want more features. We want more Kendrick. After G-Funk synths enter the picture halfway through the Hey Now, Kendrick and Dodie Six engage in a jittery back and forth. Kendrick is so magnetic that the forgettable Drake shade sticks out. Shit gets spooky every day in here in October. That's one of my favorite lines. Shit gets spooky every day in October. He raps with the syllable playfulness of E40 on Peekaboo. His Draco imitation, maybe a little young slow B in there too, is shakier than before, but as Sheik's lighthearted menace steals the show. Kendrick is a good host when all the street rappers gather to talk their shit on the posse cut GNX. Phaso is smooth with it. Young Threat sounds like a ghostly spirit. See, and now I think this guy really likes underground hip hop, which is so valid. But like, I just think have those opinions and also appreciate that this album is also legitimately good. Right? And coming on the heels of the beef, though, the regionality of the album seems more like an elaborate gotcha to Drake, rather than a musical pivot sparked out of passion. Now, I totally disagree. It can be both. It can be a gotcha moment to Drake and a musical pivot sparked by passion. Obviously, how does somebody make something like this if it's not sparked by passion? And I think anybody that has listened to this feels the passion. That's why if you watch any reaction video on YouTube, people are feeling energetically the passion that went into this album. That missing spirit in the production, too clean and too synthetic, again, people have commented on that and said they appreciate that. They like that. Anthony Fantano is not easily pleased, and he said this was the best rap album of the year and gave it a 9. He said it was over all the other great albums of the year. And I don't know if I even agree with that, because I would say probably Schoolboy Q was my favorite rap album, and maybe JPEG Mafia. And I really loved Mavi. Deep breath. The way too neat, funky basslessness of Squabble Up. The way too neat, funky bass lines? They're too neat, everybody. They're too neat. Of Squabble Up should be so fat that they rumble like an old muffler, like Pilo's Mac Dre homage does on La Russell's Majorly Independent. Mustard's backside of TV Off is drowned out by these cheesy, blaring horns. Everybody. Nobody thinks those horns are cheesy. Nobody. I can't believe, unless you're like a Drake stan or something like that, that you think. I have watched about 50 reaction videos. People naturally, without knowing that those horns are coming, love the horns. So Backside's drowned out by these cheesy blaring horns that feel made to go dumb in Nike commercials. Kendrick, maybe that's true. Kendrick reps LA hard on the mellow Dodge Blue, shouting out local high schools to hammer home the granularity, but he wastes Wally the Sensei and Roddy Ricch by having them harmonize on chill wave synths. Again, disagree. Wastes. I like the chill wave synths. A sin when you have access to basically every G-Funk producer alive or dead. He could have at least dialed one or two of the coolest non-mustard LA producers of the last decade, like Ron Ron or Juge Sizzin or Lo the Great. Okay, so I want to say this. And we're almost done with this review. That could be the case. And wouldn't this reviewer, and wouldn't you agree, that the more notoriety, the more publicity, the more resources, the more connections that Kendrick has, it only increases his ability to potentially do stuff like this in the future, to connect with other producers or to put them on, or to make maybe if he wanted to in his 50s or something, make a purely G-Funk homage album where he does collaborate with all these producers. Just because he didn't do it in this one album, I don't think is a valid criticism. Instead of two producers credited on almost every track on Soundwave, Expected and Star Whisperer Jack Antonoff. So, again, I would think, well, I don't want to get distracted by Jack Antonoff, but I don't have a problem with it personally. At least for now. I wouldn't want him to like always, only from now on, exclusively work with Jack Antonoff. Okay, almost done. Elsewhere, buried in between the LA treadmill anthems are softer melodic joints that could have been on Damn and a few creative writing exercises. Fine Enough is Luther. Fine Enough, the number one streaming song right now, the number one song in the album. Fine Enough to this person. A lullaby. What? What is this guy saying? A lullaby with SZA that is innocuously sweet and easy to listen to, punched up by a Luther Vandross sample that melts into the orchestral flourishes. Unlistenable is reincarnated. I'm putting the article down, everybody. Unlistenable. Go listen to Reincarnated right now. Do you think that's unlistenable? An homage to Tupac at his most paranoid and disoriented, where Kendrick writes from the perspective of old-time artistic influences. These writerly songs he's prone to, like this one on T-Pab's Mortal Man, have always been more technically impressive than anything else. It doesn't help that Reincarnated also feels like it exists in spite Drake for making that AI Tupac song that I forgot ever existed. I feel like I read that wrong. I didn't. Can you see it? Unlistenable. I didn't make it up. I thought I read it wrong. Unlistenable is reincarnated. Viscerally engaging is whacked out murals where you can overlook the overly glossy thumping beat because the salty raps have so much genuine hunger behind them. Unfortunately, he's not worked up about anything worth caring about. Oh my gosh. He's mad at Snoop finding Drake's AI Tupac song funny. Again, Again, that is entertaining. And again, he says it must have been the edibles. And again, Snoop found it funny. And again, I think he handled the Lil Wayne thing really well because he could have turned it into a diss. He just basically kind of said, looks like I let Lil Wayne down. Again, I only remember this because Kendrick keeps bringing it up. So what? He's mad at Lil Wayne for feeling snubbed from the Super Bowl. Didn't go to him. He's mad at the entire rap world because nobody congratulated him on booking the halftime show except Nas. Riveting. It is riveting. Whether or not it's even good for it to be riveting, whether or not you want to critique whether or not it's riveting, it is riveting for a lot of people. So again, I just don't think this article is in good faith. I think he could write a niche to have this be the review for GNX. It just doesn't seem rational, in my opinion. I'm all for airing out petty grievances in your raps, but when you're also chatting about saving the essence of hip-hop, there has to be something deeper at the root. Instead, it's the usual dick swinging of the hip-hop elite, acting as if the genre hinges on Kendrick's personal journey to black excellence. I've always thought that a rapper's personal journey to black excellence, whatever that means, is a symbol and a motivator and something that other folks can look up to. That, like, if they win, everybody wins. And generally, it seems that many people appreciate that symbol. What was Jay-Z's line? So I do this for the culture so they can know what it looks like when someone's in a Rover. You don't have to like that line, and you don't even have to like Jay-Z at this point. Jay-Z. I don't know what's going to happen to Jay-Z. I don't know. I have nothing to say about that currently. I have to read a little bit more. Kendrick's personal journey to black excellence. Is that the life of a hip-hop outlaw? Is that watching the party die? My man, the party might be at your crib now. So sarcastic. So everybody has a right to write the review that they want. I could appreciate that this is almost artistic in its commitment to being authentic in a way. I personally let's just say something. At the end of the day, a Pitchfork review isn't that big of a deal. I'm having fun making a big deal out of it. Everybody can go about their life after this. Isn't the end of the world? I mean, the album came out. We can listen to it. Even GNX isn't even that big of a deal. This is all just fun, interesting stuff that we can spend our time talking about. So I'm not like, oh, fire this guy, get on a Reddit thread, get in this comments. No. Anybody can write whatever they want. It's a review that I just happen to disagree with strongly. And I just think it also brings up a question about reviewers in general. The question has been on my mind since I read this about what type of obligation does a reviewer have, or what is the role of a reviewer? What are these folks up to? Do they have an obligation, if any, to be somewhat faithful to something that we might consider in the realm of objectivity. All art is subjective. And you can say Basquiat's are complete trash, because I'm sure there are people before Basquiat was famous that didn't get it and thought this is just a mess. And then once Basquiat is famous, now these are worth tons of money. Any artist, any art, it could be looked at as trash from a certain perspective. And in terms of a collective conversation, and in terms of what this person did in this review, weighing all the factors like this person did in here, like unpacking all of the different culturally relevant historical stuff that's surrounding this before and after, and all the meaning that it's being made out of in terms of like hip hop and the Super Bowl and the history and everything else. I just, to me, ultimately, personally, it bumps Pitchfork down in terms of being reputable. And if they kept writing reviews like this, I would think that that's my general take. I would be less interested in reading their reviews. I was very interested in their Mr. Morale review, and I think it was very valid to bump that album down for Kodak Black and Anti-Diaries. Very valid. So when I read that, I was like, I thought that was going to get it. I thought it was going to be his best reviewed album. I read it and I was like, fair. That review seems fair for Mr. Morale. And maybe if you removed Kodak Black and Anti-Diaries, it would be like a 9.2. This review, I don't agree with. And if it keeps happening where what if Kendrick comes out with an even better album next and it's reviewed like a 5.2 or something like that? It's just, I think Pitchfork and whoever this reviewer is, Alphonse Pierre, what's his name? I don't want to get his name wrong. He deserves to be, Alphonse Pierre. Keeps writing reviews like that. I just don't think, a lot of people don't even care about Pitchfork. So it's not like they're like this. I don't even see anybody really talking about Pitchfork like that. I happen to like Pitchfork. So this is my personal thing, engaging with a publication that I've liked. Aside from that, it looks like Metacritic, that, kind of compiles all the various reviews for GNX. It has very high rankings. Many, many, many publications have given it good reviews. But I just talked and talked and talked right now, which in a way was fun, but I would love to have feedback. So, as you can definitely see, this channel has no subscribers or followers. And then the last video I made, it got like 3 comments. If you comment, I will read and respond, because for now I'm really very much wanting that. And I would love to hear any thoughts you all have about GNX, Kendrick, Drake, this reviews in general, art, subjectivity, objectivity, how someone reviews, rubrics for reviewing, the history of criticism and art criticism, anything that you have to say about any of that, I'm definitely interested. And less certain, more curious. That's the sort of goal of this podcast. I'm trying to approach this article with curiosity. And I think the key to our tagline, less certain, more curious, doesn't mean no certainty or no opinion. It just means try to absorb things through a new perspective or different lenses as much as possible. And I think one of the interesting and maybe sad things is that I have learned about so many new artists over the years that have really wonderfully challenged my sense of taste in music, my perspectives on the world through Pitchfork. So Pitchfork has been a way generally for me to be more curious about music in the world. And it's amazing in so many ways that I've gotten so much of that information for free from this random website. It's not that random, but where do you like to look at reviews, if at all? What YouTube channels do you like? Where do you get your music recommendations? These types of things I'm very interested in. And I'm going to end this YouTube video today with a different short, the very end, not a whole review, of the Paste magazine review. Now I would say this. I used to get the printed publication of Paste magazine and Spin magazine, And Spin Magazine and Paste stopped making physical copies, which is sad because they really started turning their magazines into an art piece. And Pitchfork doesn't do printed out publications. And then I would say from my perspective, Paste is the ultimate, even more than Pitchfork, hoity-toity, artsy, highfalutin review site. Okay. And their review of GNX is like quadruple the size of that Pitchfork one I just read to you. So they put a lot of time into this review and a lot of thought, and they really liked it. And the guy that wrote this review, his name is Matt Mitchell. And so there it is. I mean, it's intellectual, it's robust, it's fun, it's interesting, it's valid. They say good things. I happen to agree with lots of the things, and they make points that I wasn't really thinking of that I also generally happen to agree with. I don't know what to say about that. I like it. So I think I would recommend if you were listening to this and you think, ooh, I'm really feeling like I'd like to go read a few more reviews of GNX and just get a sense, go read the Pitchfork one if you want to recap that after I just read that whole thing to you. But I would recommend the Paste magazine, Paste magazine review of GNX because it's very interesting, very intellectually stimulating, and probably has some great counterpoints to this Pitchfork review. But just as a way to sort of close out our time here, I'm going to end this way, and I'm just going to hit stop on this video, and we're going to call it a night, and I'll hopefully be back next Thursday because that's when I'm planning on recording videos like this. So this is by Matt Mitchell from Pitchfork Magazine, the last 2 paragraphs of his review of GNX. If you've listened to this video, thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm just talking into a void here, but so far I'm really enjoying it. And like I said last week, I love YouTube. And again, I said this last week, I've heard that if you enjoy a certain medium, don't just consume, try to give back by creating your own thing. So this is my own little version of giving back in my own way and sort of putting myself into the conversation with all these other YouTubers I like. But this is by Matt Mitchell from Paste. So he says this: GNX is a fascinating listen that's as flawed as any Kendrick's previous albums. He converses with the divine, walks the margins that separate good and evil, dives a dive but hits on the cash out, puts his next up disciples under the light, and calls upon pop music's most in-demand producer to make his West Coast domination legible. The Look What I've Done For You chorus, the Heart Part 5, reverberates across the surreal, hypnotizing, danceable trip through a hip-hop prophet's own ego death, an immediate, braggadocious, finessing renewal. As it is written in Isaiah 14, the realm of the dead below is all astir to meet you at your coming. It rouses the spirits of the departed to greet you, all those who were leaders in the world. It makes them rise from their thrones, all those who were kings over the nations. They will all respond. They will say to you, you also have become weak as we are. You have become like us. But GNX is right. There ain't no legends if Kendrick Lamar's legend ends. The party may be dead, but it's far from over. He's a Pulitzer Prize-winning artist. His music is enshrined in the Library of Congress, and Good Kid, Mad City entered the Billboard of 200 upon its release 12 years ago and has remained there for all 629 weeks since. Like the man on the mic says, tell me why you think you deserve to be the greatest of all time. I deserve it all. Thanks for listening, everybody.